Hello and welcome back to Internalize, the podcast, where I am procrastinating and doing things at the last possible minute. I don't know how long this will be. This will probably be like 8 minutes if I'm able to delay long enough to make it long. But yeah, it's like 10:30 and 10:15, and I have not recorded today's podcast, and I am, yeah, bad times, bad times. Anyway, I it's it's a bad experience, and it's also not a good idea. It's a bad idea, but well, what can you do, I suppose. So uh an interesting, I mean, not interesting, it's not interesting to a lot of people, but it is interesting to few people. So I think I'll talk about it. Like today I want to talk about the stuff, the technology, the apps, if you will, that I use to help me study. There are, well, there are quite a few, but I'm going to narrow it down to three for now. Maybe I'm leaving it open, leaving the blog post and the podcast open to a sequel, version 2, three other apps that help me study. But yeah, these are pretty, I guess, they're not the most groundbreaking apps in the world. To be fair, I did sort of flick it from other people. So there there is definitely a lack of originality, but I do think it is these apps are very helpful and almost necessary at this point to my workflow. I mean, for the last, I think, 4 years I've been sort of reliant on these apps, and they've worked pretty well for me, I'd like to say. uh, Even though I don't think I've used any of them to truly their like full potential. But anyway, so first up, Notion. Of course, I think everybody. Okay, actually, before I get to Notion, this is a taster. I want to talk about the sort of principles I like to think about when coming up with technological answers to technological solutions to real world non-tech problems. So let's say studying is a real life problem and coming up with a technological solution to that. In that, in this case, uh, the main things I think are important to keep in mind, and that I do keep in mind, is first of all, reliability. These things have to be reliable. They have to be redundant, and they should just work. I shouldn't be annoyed because something hasn't synced, so I have to manually go to the old device and sync it. It should be solid. It should work. It shouldn't crash. It should be fast. It should work. Uh, and secondly, it shouldn't be used everywhere. Like you don't have to automate everything. I don't automate everything, and that's fine. I think if you overdo it, also it gets kind of annoying. It kind of gets in the way, right? So yeah, it should fade into the background, and it should enhance reality and not kind of overtake it. So that's why I guess reliability and simplicity, intuitiveness, they're the sort of north stars that I keep in mind when coming up with tech answers to non-tech problems. In this case, though, my main what do you say? My main drivers, my main north stars, my main parameters to look for was is first of all cross-platform compatibility. That is really important to me. I mean, I use like three different platforms. I use iPad, I use Windows, and I use Android. And having something that works across all three and has actual sync and not some bullshit, uh, like they have different apps but like it's a whole different ecosystem altogether, that does not work. I want it to be legit. It should have cross platform compatibility. Second of all, should be intuitive. I shouldn't need to, I mean, I don't, even if it has some, even like Notion, if it has a big learning curve, I don't really need to get on the learning curve to actually start using it. And not just that, it should be intuitive to interact with the app itself on a daily basis. Even if there is a learning curve, once you get past it, it should make sense at least to some extent how interacting with these apps are. So And lastly, reliability, of course. I shouldn't really be concerned about whether my flashcards have synced or whether my Notion uh, is going to be there on my iPad. I should be like okay with stuff just working. I should be, uh, what do you say? I should be confident that things will work. So, yeah, so that's in keeping these in mind. I found a few things that help me study quite a lot actually. So here they are. First of all, again, as I've said, Notion. Notion used basically everywhere. Basically, every study tuber has a Notion setup. Notion is just so ubiquitous, and that's for good reason. It's first of all, cross-platform is incredible on Notion. If you use like multiple platforms like pretty often, it doesn't sign you out. Otherwise, it does, which is annoying. But if it doesn't sign you out, and it syncs like literally just today I wrote my blog on a laptop and I came to my desktop and like seconds later it synced everything, which is like amazing. Not even like worried about things not being synced. It's just so good, which is something which I like, something I was a little bit miffed with when I used to use OneNote like a couple of years ago. But anyway, Notion works supremely well, so I really enjoy that. And again, apps for everything: iOS, Android, Mac, Windows. I don't know about Linux, but there's a web app, so it doesn't matter. Linux users. Secondly, it is powerful as hell. So there's like automations and stuff. And honestly, I don't even know how to use like 90% of Notion's features. The thing is, I really like how Notion structures their pages. Like you can have pages on pages, pages inside of pages, which is good because it helps me keep track of where everything is, even if it's sort of difficult to get to. I kind of like this organization system. It sort of works pretty well for my sort of, my structured brain, as you might have noticed from a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, Notion really helpful in that regard. If you don't like this though, you could like this Notion system. You could probably go with something like Obsidian, which is a lot more nebulous and more like a neural network than let's say uh, an algorithm. It's a bit more. They're a bit more like branches to a tree uh, than a file structure, I suppose. uh anyway, I like the subfolder structure. Like if I need to get to my cognitive 11th grade psychology notes, I don't even have to hit search. I can literally go to study AS level psychology and cognitive approach, and it's just so easy. It works pretty well. Something pretty underrated as well is Notion's Android widget. It's pretty sick. You can like access pages with a click. The widget is pretty nice on iOS as well, but I specifically want to shout out the Android widget. But it's not perfect. I think Notion is pretty slow, which is something I'm pretty annoyed with. But I don't think you can really have a fast note taking program and expect to hold a really large amount of data for a long period of time, which is what Notion does very well. So I don't use Notion as my capture site. I don't like use Notion for brain dumping. That I use Google Keep. I think Apple Notes is also really nice. Just super lightweight, super fast applications. And yeah, again, the structure. If you don't enjoy the structure, you could probably like something like Rome Research or Obsidian more. Now, how I use Notion is pretty simple. I don't really think you need Notion for this, but I just like, I like Notion. I basically have, pages on pages, just storing all of my chapters, which is pretty sick. And each page has questions, which I expect, like questions based on the information I think is critical for the exam. These questions are part of a toggle list, which means I can basically toggle something inside of the list or toggle it off. Uh, and that basically inside the toggle, I have the answer. So that helps me revise, right? I look at the question, I think or I say out loud what the answer is, and then I open it and I see whether the answer is correct, which is awesome. Second up, Anki. I think anyone who has spent time in this sphere knows about Anki. Just objectively the best flashcard application out there. apps for everything: Android, iOS, Mac, Windows, web. Some of these are paid though, and some of them are unofficial, which kind of sucks, but all of them have pretty crazy cross platform support. And the web app is pretty nice as well. I mean, it doesn't look great, but it's powerful, and it's not like any less powerful than the desktop app, which is pretty sick. Anki's cloud sync is really good, to be honest. Like, it's not as seamless as something like Notion, but it's really, really reliable. Like, every time you close the application, it just syncs, and you're not worried about, a whole deck of 1,000 cards going missing. And it has great offline deck support. So if you can export decks to keep in on your machine if you want. You can import decks because Anki's pretty amazing community, which creates decks themselves. So you can import decks, which is awesome. But Anki's superpower is definitely built-in spaced repetition. Basically, spaced repetition, if you don't know, is it's one of the best ways to remember stuff, remember facts and things. You're basically interrupting the forgetting curve by increasing the amount of time between which you do a next revision. Now, this is a built-in feature in Anki. So based on how confident you are with certain flashcards, Anki will kind of create an algorithmically generated personalized training profile for you. So every day you have a different set of flashcards to revise. And that's what makes Anki so much better, and that's the main reason I use it. Next is, well, Excel. The least flashy, the most reliable, but the most like unromantic version of like study software, Excel. Excel is a home to my retrospective revision timetable, and I use the main reason I use is just because it's really easy to use. There's nothing inherently great about Excel apart from reliability. More on that later, but it's just so simple. I don't need to try and get something more fancy because Excel does everything I need to. Also, Excel's cross-platform is pretty great, especially OneDrive storage is pretty quick in updating across devices, which is awesome. And there are apps on every platform imaginable, so you don't even have to worry about not being supported. But again, nothing special about Excel compared to Google Sheets, so you can use it yourself. I mean, you can use Google Sheets if you don't own Excel, but I do own Excel, so I use Excel. Main reason I use Excel is I use it to keep track of how many times and how confident I am in the revision of a chapter. And that kind of helps me decide what to study. So if I have to study a subject, I go into the sheet for that subject and I see, well, I have these chapters that I have recently revised and these I've revised long ago. So I'll do the ones I've revised long ago first. Or I'll mark them based on how confident I am. So in that case, I will revise the least confident chapters first. So in that that's really helpful in just optimizing the studying workflow. That's called a retrospective revision timetable. In case you want to Google that, YouTube that. But That's all for today. I am going to rush to publish this, lest I miss my deadline. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope to catch you next week if I do not procrastinate. See you.